Hey everyone, welcome back to our Midweek Bible studies here at AEC. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and from our Lord Jesus Christ. It's a blessing to be with you here today and to offer up some reflection from the scriptures. If you've been with us the past couple of weeks since Easter, we've been taking a look at several stories in different Gospels of Jesus with his disciples after the resurrection. Matthew, Luke, and John each have some stories of Jesus interacting with the disciples after his resurrection. And we're taking a look at what those texts mean for us, what they look like for us as disciples in the 21st century, and how they're helpful for our own understanding of what it means to live with Jesus and follow Jesus here in our current context. So we've taken a look only in Luke so far. We're going to turn over into the next gospel, into John's gospel, and take a look at some of his material and some of what Jesus says to his disciples after the resurrection in John's gospel. Today's story is a pretty famous one. It's one that I think many of you will be aware of. It's the story of the individual who we now call Doubting Thomas, but I'm sure he would have had some qualms about being called Doubting Thomas. I'm sure he didn't coin that name himself, but he's a famous character in Christian tradition for the story that we're about to read. This is John chapter 20, beginning at verse 24. Now Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him that we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. And Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. This is the word of the Lord for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You'll notice a couple similarities in this text from some of the stories in Luke about Jesus' life after the resurrection. You'll notice that when Jesus appears to the disciples, we mentioned this in our Sunday service, and in both of the stories of Luke that we've covered in the past midweek Bible studies, that when Jesus enters the space with the disciples, his pronouncement is that of peace. So Jesus' presence among the disciples is that of peace. And so that's a commonality between Luke's gospel and John's gospel. You also have the detail here that in the post-resurrection situation of the disciples, they are afraid. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what to imagine coming forward, and then in the midst of this, they're kind of huddled up in a room, locked the doors, and they're staying there, tightly cordoned off from anybody seeing them. And that's where Jesus shows up to them in the midst of that sort of fear and anxiety and uncertainty. And again, a commonality between Luke's gospel and what we have here in John. There's a couple of unique elements here. We get this conversation between Thomas and Jesus. What's interesting is the way that the story is told is that Thomas was not there the first time many of the disciples met with the resurrected Jesus. So Thomas doesn't necessarily doubt that Jesus has resurrected. Thomas doubts the account of the disciples telling him that Jesus has resurrected. So this is an interesting detail that sometimes gets missed. When we call Thomas Doubting Thomas, it's not necessarily that he's bad or wrong for not having believed the disciples. What Thomas wants is the experience that all the other disciples got, the opportunity to meet face to face with the resurrected Jesus. The witness of the others around him didn't really land. He wants to see Jesus face to face. And he gets what the other disciples experienced. In this scene, Jesus says, look, here's my hands, here's my side, it's me. It's the same one who you lived and journeyed with these past 3 years. I've died and now I have risen. I'm alive again. And Thomas is totally transformed after this. Usually, we give Thomas a sort of negative connotation, or we cast him in a dark light. But really, what Thomas is doing here is very brave, if we're being honest. He needs the certainty, he needs the confirmation, he needs to meet with the one he loves, Jesus, and he needs to walk forward knowing that he has that grounded certainty with him. That relationship will extend forward. He's hurt, he's saddened, he's heard from the disciples something, but he needs to see it for himself. What really comforts me in a text like this is that this experience of doubt, or this experience of wanting intimate connection with Jesus, experiencing Jesus face to face, not just hearing about him or learning about him from other people, but really meeting with him face to face, is that it's not shamed by Jesus necessarily, but that it's welcomed and it's disarmed in many ways. Thomas brings this concern to Jesus. He sees Jesus, he meets with him, and what does Jesus say? He says, "Take a look. It's me. Touch me, feel me, embrace me, come to me, experience me. Stop doubting and believe." It's an invitation. So Jesus' interaction with Thomas is not one of shame. Jesus' interaction with Thomas is not one of just sort of shutting him out and closing him out and making him feel guilty in front of all the other disciples. It's an invitation to come and to see, which is a common refrain all throughout John's gospel. Jesus' invitation to others is to come and to see, to come and experience him. It's the same here. And so what I gather from this text and what I offer for you today is that maybe you have some doubts, maybe you have some concerns, maybe you have this same sort of inkling that Thomas has. This need to meet with Christ, to experience Christ and his richness, not to hear about it from me or from others, but to really come into contact with him in a way that's fresh and restorative. And that kind of sentiment, that kind of feeling, that kind of desire and prayer to say, I want to know you better than just hearing about you, is not shamed by Jesus here. It's actually welcomed. And he invites it. It sort of disarms it by inviting us to come and to see and to experience him. It's a welcome invitation. It also strikes me, and this is something I've thought about as I read the text many different times, but you notice at the end, it's kind of like an open letter to anybody else who's going to read John's gospel. Jesus kind of, they call it breaking the third wall or breaking the fourth wall. I can't remember which wall, but in television or film, when you kind of look towards the camera and you break the sort of illusion that this is an actual scene happening. And so here Jesus kind of turns towards the camera and says, because you've seen me, you believe. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. This is sort of a message to those who will read this text for generations and generations to come. As if to say, look, here's this guy, Thomas, who has spent 3 years with Jesus, who has experienced him, who's learned from him, who's walked with him, who grieved his death and now is celebrating his resurrection. This guy, Thomas, had trouble believing this stuff. This guy, Thomas, who experienced Jesus face to face and who saw his resurrected body, he had trouble believing. He needed to see Jesus in this sense and have this kind of evidence presented to him. And even then, some of the other disciples had trouble too, moving forward. They needed some direction and some guidance. And so I find it incredibly comforting that John lands this story here at the close of his gospel for us as disciples to recognize that it's okay. It's an experience that we as followers of Jesus will experience. Doubt, a need for deeper intimacy, a need for answers, a need for some sort of understanding moving forward. And so a text like this maybe takes your doubts and all of those needs and says, yeah, it's okay. You're blessed that you're on this journey with Jesus, regardless of, not seeing him face to face in his resurrected presence. And so, this text ends with a reminder to us that our experiences of doubt or our experiences of needing to have Jesus near to us in certain moments is okay, right? And it's something to be embraced because Jesus will embrace us in those moments. Rather than shame or guilt, Jesus invites an honesty here, an authenticity here that welcomes us and disarms the sort of guilt that might come with it in some traditions, and instead says, yeah, welcome, come and see. Well, I hope you're enjoying these Bible studies here through this post-Easter scene exploration. If you have any opportunities to give feedback, or if you have any comments or questions that you'd like to send on our way, you're welcome to do so. You can email them to office.aecc@gmail.com, or you can post on Facebook or any of your sort of questions or any of your concerns or comments that you find interesting about the text. So you're welcome to do that. I'll see you next week, and God willing, we'll have another text from the Gospel of John to wrap up our time in John's Gospel, and we'll move finally to Matthew, where we'll close off. God bless. We'll see you next week.